Guess what time it is? It's 10 minutes with Barb and Ron. And boy, do we have a guest. Barb.
You do. Hey, everyone. Barb Gentili-Green here. I reached out to somebody I've known for a while. We've not worked closely together, but you know how you can sort of have respect for somebody, Ron, even though you've never really worked closely with them, just because of the way you hear them interact when you're at meetings and things like that. So Neil Gupta here. Neil, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Neil Gupta, and I get to serve as the Director of Secondary Education for Worthington Schools. So about 11,000 students in our district, and I oversee about 4 traditional middle schools, and then an alternative middle school, and then 2 traditional high schools with an experiential high school and an alternative high school. And every day is fast paced. I love what I get to do. On the side, I get to work with Creative Leadership Solutions. It's the company with Doug Reeves. And so I get a chance to kind of, connect with him and learn with other associates and continue kind of working with other school districts and in other states around professional learning with educators.
Wow. Yeah, like you have time to do all of that.
Yeah. I always say you neglect, like seriously, like you neglect your family or you neglect your weight, like your exercise. And there's this uncomfortable laughter. And I always say, something's got to give though. And so, unfortunately, sometimes those things happen. But my family knows that like I come back sometimes a better person. I'm more energized after I come back from some place that I've met with some educators, and it helps to kind of fill my bucket.
Right. Yeah, that's important. We got to keep that going, don't we? Mm-hmm. So you've been in leadership positions for quite a few years, and a lot of leaders watch our show, and they're really trying to get their staff moving forward in this common vision. And I think you've picked some tricks up along the way. So what are some of the things that you think really make a difference in a leader, or the things that a leader does to get their folks to come along beside them?
Sure. So I'll definitely talk out of experience. I've had different experiences in my journey of leadership. I'll start with my favorite quote. And I think my favorite quote kind of goes along with it. It's my life quote. It's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And I think the reason why I love that quote is because I assumed that the role of a leader was to go as fast as possible, to blaze that trail and to kind of, never look back. You keep looking forward. And that's where I failed, to be honest with you. I failed because I didn't realize that the journey is just as important as a destination, that you bring people with you through that. And it's about that idea of collaboration. It's the idea about sustainability. It's the idea of like, if you're not always looking around you, not behind you to see if there are people around, then it's not even worth doing. And that's where I've stubbed my toe many, many times, I think, to realize, I think exactly to your question of, I'm not sure if there is any vocation, but definitely in education, it is about collaboration, how we do things. John Hattie, the most powerful research out there on effect size that he did there. If 0.4 is the trigger point for there to be some significant change that happens, positive change that happens, collective efficacy is 1.67. In other words, that's 4 times the power when collective efficacy, the idea of everybody is kind of rowing in the same direction, and they feel like they have the tools and the resources, the knowledge, the support to be able to do that. And that's the goal. That's our goal as leaders, regardless of our title. That's our goal. Our goal as leaders is to make sure we're building those systems in place. And so, I think that the things that I think about is this idea about how we help create that environment for people to be vulnerable and share information about what's happening. I have these monthly meetings with our staff, for example, and with our principal team once a month. And after the meeting's over, people in my office will come up to me and they'll say, "How was your meeting today?" And that's an easy question, right? Either it's a good meeting or a bad meeting. Should take you 3 seconds to answer the question. And I always pause. And it's been 7 years, and I still will pause. And I have to think, and I replay the meeting in my mind, for a couple more seconds. And what I'm replaying is, was there pushback in the meeting? Were there questions? Where was there somebody that raised their hand and said, "I disagree with you"? And I'm looking for those things, because if they didn't happen in a 3-hour meeting, then they probably didn't hear me real well. They weren't listening. They weren't paying attention, or they just didn't care, or I didn't create an environment where they felt safe to be able to share. And so they're not having the meeting conversation in the room. They're having it out in the parking lot right now. So, I'm looking for, oh, wait a minute. No, they disagreed with me. Oh, wait a minute. They got fired up and we talked about that. Oh, wait a minute. I walked in with this, but we walked out with more of a shared vision and how things happen. And so, I think that you think about collaborative structures like your agendas and you're in that vulnerable stage to be able to be thinking about those things. So Doug Reeves had just written a book called Fearless Leaders. And in there, he references Amy Edmonds, who does work around this concept of psychological safety. So she really talks about this idea of, have you created that environment where people feel safe in a place of taking a risk, speaking up, saying something against it, and not feeling that there'll be retaliation, not feeling that there'll be ridicule, not feeling that there'll be some kind of targeting that happens after the meeting. And as leaders, we have to be able to be vulnerable to say, I don't know all the answers. I know I have the title that says that I maybe should, but how do we get in the room and be able to say, here's something that we need to tackle, and how do we collectively be able to do that? And again, I think that in some situations, sometimes we self-impose and think that we have to know all the answers. Leaders have to know the answers. I think that we're in that place now that says, like, Brene Brown says it, like, we don't have to be in that place. We can be vulnerable and say, I don't know what I don't know. And it's okay to kind of come to the table and look through and work on some of those things. So with that, I'm going to pause real quick. I'll let you ask any qualifying question, and then I can keep going, or we can go in a different direction, wherever you want to go.
Well, Ron, I told Ron, I said, we just have to ask Neil a question and he is going to roll with it and give us the gold. So you did. Well, you said it so quickly, but you a couple of times said the word vulnerable. And I think of new administrators who are coming into the field. And I know I was that way as a new administrator, like exactly what you said. We should have the answers. They must have hired me because they thought I had the answers. And so I certainly snubbed my toe there because, I was afraid to say I didn't know. And so I think that's great advice, like just that willingness to say, I'll find out for you. Let's work on it together. But, I don't have all the answers. And that creates that environment that people are then willing to take some risks in. So, wow. Ron, I could talk to Neil forever, but is there something you thought of when you listened to
you know what struck me was when he said, I had the 3-hour meeting, and then he thought back to what made it a good meeting. And I love the fact that you named out the things that you should have seen. And if you don't see them, why didn't you? I love the way that thought process you used. I also like the fact that you said, hey, there was a few times in my life I looked back and there wasn't anybody following me. They were gone, and that's a big one too. So I'm sitting here you've got me really thinking, wow.
Well, let me piggyback off that real quick then to share, I think again, around the research, Doug Reeves also referenced, this was back, I think 15 years ago or 18 years ago in one of his books that really caught me, was he talks about the myth of linearity. And we always think that like more implementation means more outcome. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But we think that if I give an example of, 10 people in a department or 10 people in a staff, let's say, if I get 2 people to buy into it or to believe in this certain thing, I'll get certain results. And if I have 4 people, then I'll get better results than the 2. And if I have 6 people, I'll get better. And actually, the research was done, I think, through Johns Hopkins, that's a myth. That actually doesn't happen that way. That it stays flat for the most part until you get to 90%. And they talk about, we use the phrase 90%, and we use the phrase CFI, 90% consistency, fidelity, and integrity. So until I can create a situation, a scenario, an environment where 9 of my 10 teachers will understand that collective efficacy, understand how to do a certain initiative, that they believe in it. They feel like they're supported to be able to implement that. And they do it with that consistency, fidelity, and integrity. And I love the word fidelity. Like they're doing it with fidelity. They're not just kind of going through the motions. So in other words, it stays flat until you get to that 90% mark. So as a leader, for me, I can't go home at night and say, you know what? I got like about half the staff to agree to it. And I'm like patting myself on the back. I know that if I'm going to build this, I've got to build it in such a way where I'm trying to look for that 90% value that's going to come in order for us to make those maximum results. Until that time, it won't happen. And so as I work with administrators and I work with teams, I'm always kind of saying, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? Like, we can't be okay with, it's okay to have 2 trailblazers, for example. I'm fine with that, but make sure you go trailblaze and come back and help build capacity and build capacity and build capacity, not just keep moving and keep moving and keep moving. We won't get there otherwise. Okay, great. That's something. Hey, I learned something new on 10 Minutes with Barb and Ron that I want to go check out. So with that, Barb is out.
Well, thanks so much, Neil. And Ron's out too.
See you next time.
Thank you.
YouTube, please subscribe. Like, comment, and share.